Look around, look around. Is this loud enough for you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Okay. Eliza.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And today we are discussing Chapter 17, The Trial, where Fitz is off into the wilderness and has to come back.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning part, though, is kind of what we mentioned in maybe the first or second or third episode that we did, talking about his given man name.
Uh-huh.
And it's talking about that ceremony in general. So it seems like it's kind of a holdover from like a pagan religious history ritual, because this is like one of the only rituals we see.
Right. And it's kind of like a secret society.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know, it's kind of reminiscent of like, you know, like the Masons or something. You have to have an initiation, and I don't know,
right.
We don't really see much of anything like this.
Yeah, and it also kind of feels a little bit out of nowhere, at least to me.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, okay, here's a random ceremony that will never be touched on again.
It happens on a boy's 14th birthday. You have to have a man, capital M, sponsor somebody. So they have to have gone through this ritual, we're assuming that's what you get the title of capital M man.
Mm-hmm.
And then have a dozen other men who concede that the boy is worthy and ready. So it says, living among the men at arms, I knew of the ceremony and knew enough of its gravity and selectivity that I never expected to participate in it. For one thing, no one knew my birth date. For another, I had no knowledge of who was a man, let alone if 12 men existed who would find me worthy. So, in the middle of the night, months after this test that we're about to read about is passed, he is woken up and surrounded by robed and hooded figures. Within the dark hoods, I glimpsed the masks of the pillars. I kind of want to like cut it there. That's about halfway done with this intro and just kind of discuss what we know about it so far and your thoughts on it. Because to me, it's really weird. Yeah,
super weird. I don't know. I feel like this whole thing is kind of strange. It kind of seems like it's something that was brought in by the common folk. This isn't typical, like, a secret society for the rich kids, I guess. Which I think makes it more interesting to me. And, I mean, I'm gonna assume that the man, capital M, who brought him into the society is Burrich.
That was my first thought too.
But
also, like, at the end of this chapter, Burrich doesn't want to see Fitz at all.
Right.
Like, he is like, I'm done with you. Don't come around my stables. Don't help me.
But who else would it be?
Right? So the rest of the details is that they hand a fish, a bird, and a land beast. And you can either choose to, like, you choose one to kill or something like that, or choose to whatever. And he released all of them.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't exactly tell us.
It does. I don't think they told him what to do either with them.
He just has these in his hands, and it's very undetailed.
Yeah.
Which is strange.
But I chose to release it, not to death, but back to its own free existence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think the scarcity of the depiction is because this is a secret thing and he's not supposed to write about it.
Right.
He's not supposed to tell anybody about this part of his life.
Yeah. It's at the beginning of that, it says no one may speak or write of the ceremony details. Mm-hmm.
And apparently there was no feast, which there normally is, because
I'm guessing like they just eat whatever animal is released to death.
But I mean, it says, but even in my state of mind at that time, I felt there had been enough blood and death around me to last a lifetime, and I refused to kill with hands or teeth. Which is very interesting.
Yeah. I'm assuming because pretty soon after this, maybe in the chapter after this, he starts like getting assignments to kill people.
Yes.
And I think this happens after those assignments are starting. So at that point in his life, he's killed a lot of people, realizes he doesn't really like it, and doesn't want to kill more things around him immediately with his hands or teeth or anything. So, but he is still deemed worthy. And it says, "My man still chose to give me a name, so he could have not been totally displeased. The name is in the old tongue, which has no letters and cannot be written. Nor have I ever found any with whom I chose to share the knowledge of my man name. But it's an ancient meaning, I think, I can divulge here. Catalyst, the changer." So, like, it just begs the question of who sponsored him, who was there. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird. Like, my first thought immediately also went to Burrich. But
what if it was Shrewd?
I know, that's another thought that I had too. Like, there's like, I think I have like 5 possibilities that I wrote down.
Okay.
Shrewd, Burrich, Verity, Chade, or one of the guardsmen.
That's fair. He was raised by the guard. But why would the guardsmen call him Catalyst?
Yeah, I wrote down reasons why they would name him like that too. So guardsmen, like Blade or Gage or something, would just be destiny or luck, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Like, it'd have to come down to that. If it was Shrewd, we know he has an interest in the White Prophets and the prophecy. He took an interest in the Fool and knows something about that.
Right.
But also, it's like the king. So I don't know if he would...
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I mean, we don't... It's a secret society. We don't know who... And they're all in masks, right? The whole time, as far as we know. I mean, it could literally be anyone.
Right. I don't know. It just feels like Shrewd doesn't take that close of an interest. He has his tool. He's getting trained by Chade, and it just feels distance, even though he has a really good reason to name him Changer or Catalyst. And another one, I don't think the Fool is part of this either, because one, he is more like a boy to everybody else. He's ostracized by pretty much everybody else, and you have to be a capital M man to go through this.
Right.
And I doubt...
I think he's too other in the sense that he doesn't really
belong to that society.
Yeah, or to any society, it feels like most of the time.
Verity could. He has a slight interest, but also he's super preoccupied during this time with skilling. And I guess he could name him Catalyst or Changer through hearing about like the prophecies from Shrewd, or just hearing all the change that he brought to like his life kind of thing.
Right. Or it could be that. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily directly relate to...
It could be just quote unquote coincidence. Burrich, obviously, yes, it could be, like just a random happenstance that he named him Catalyst or Changer, but also we know all of the animals call Burrich Heart of the Pack, so we know that animals kind of have names for people. Mm-hmm. So they could have been whispering Changer basically to Fitz the whole time, and Burrich just subconsciously picks up on that because we know Night Eyes just calls him that.
That's true.
Without even telling him his actual man name or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. I was going to say, or just because he's changed the course of who would be the ruler, and everybody knows that, so he is in a way a catalyst, even if they don't grasp the full depth of his cataclysm. The full depth of his catalysm.
Yeah. But also, like, I don't think it's Chade, because even though he seems like the perfect type to be part of a secret society or like still follows old ways, naming your farseer person who's going to inherit your position to bring stability to the 6 duchies and like the kingdom and provide like, the status quo, does not want to name your successor Changer or Catalyst. Like, that just feels so contradictory to me.
Well, But what if this is like a mask on, nobody knows it's me, I get to fully believe and deal with and like act the way I personally want to act without any fear of it getting back to the king or affecting the crown because I'm wearing a mask and just another capital M man.
Yeah, but if he believes that you can name somebody in this old tongue as a man name and then that is like who they become, you still that would still affect him if he named him like that. Yeah. You know? I just feel like it's not something that Chade would name him.
I guess.
I could see him totally doing everything else about that. So my best guess still is Burrich, even though they did not want to see each other.
Which is so weird. I mean, it makes sense because Burrich does still love him even when he sends him away.
Still wants the best for him.
It's more of a self-punishment than really a punishment to Fitz. But... And also I wonder, do the animals call him Changer later because that's his man name and they know it on some level? Or...
Maybe. I don't know.
Or, hear me out, what if capital M men are all witted... And this is an old secret wit society. I mean, it wouldn't be told as that way. And that could also be why it's so selective.
Yeah,
and then that's why animals call you that name.
Interesting.
I don't know. Probably not, but maybe.
That's an interesting theory, yeah. We don't really hear anything else about this, so we don't really know.
Does he really not ever tell anybody else? Not even, like, the fool at the end?
I think he says... I mean, the fool... refers to him as Catalyst and Changer. I don't know if he mentions that he was named that.
But to be fair,
he does say to Nettle, I think, that he's Changer. Like, that's his name in the dreams before, like, they actually meet when she's a child as well.
Yeah.
Like, what can I call you? Not like Wolfman, it's Changer. I think that's what he says, too. But he never says that, like, this is what I was named as my man, because you're not supposed to speak about it or write it down.
It's like Fight Club.
Yeah, exactly. First two rules.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I do want to bring up one thing that is very interesting and I was kind of confused about, is that it says... I glimpsed masks of the pillars. Pillars capitalized.
Yep.
What are the pillars?
I have no idea.
Like it's referred to as like a commonplace. We call these the pillars. It's obvious like symbols and stuff.
Maybe that's like the religion's official name of like Ida and El.
Maybe.
They're the pillars. And like they have the whole thing in their society theory. About like the witness stones, and those are kind of described as pillars, and those are where like the gods reside, right, in their justice.
They're also skill pillars.
Yes. So maybe those are the people that like maintain the pillars. I don't know.
I looked into this a little bit, and I found some other discussions, and someone, I'm sorry if this was you and you're listening and I forgot your name, but someone mentioned that it might be the symbols on the skill pillars, because I think we learn later that they're based after old Out Islander runes, and there's 12 of them.
Oh.
And that fits wonderfully until you realize there's 13 people at the ceremony who are masked, the sponsor, and then 12 others.
But they could be wearing... like the same. It doesn't necessarily mean that they all have different pillar marks, you know? Like they could have a certain one. This guy really likes the east facing pillar, and so he gets that, but so does the other man over there. I don't know, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Some jealousy going on, infighting about who gets to wear what mask and how often.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I don't think there's any mention of the pillars that is not in reference to the skill pillars other than this. So I feel like it has to reference those in some way. And I'm not imagining just a weathered stone pillar on everybody's face. Like, that's just... I don't understand. But it also doesn't make sense that they would be the symbols of the skill pillars, because this is complete new news to Fitz later on. And here he's writing about it before he learns about the skill pillars.
Right.
Like he's super knowledgeable in it. So I really don't know.
I don't know either.
If you guys have any ideas or thoughts about that, please let us know. I'm really curious about this, actually, because I didn't find a lot of discussion on it, and man, I really don't know.
I know, this weird secret society that only comes up once.
I like the pillars, like as in Ida and Elle, but also we don't really hear about any iconography or anything or any symbols that they have.
I know. For such a, like, weirdly religious society, weirdly religious being that they all, like, kind of subscribe the idea that these two exist, you don't hear a lot about, like, a church or anything. Like, there's no building or place, that altar, except for the skill pillars where people go to fight.
Yeah.
So
anyways, that's pretty much it. He gets named Catalyst the Changer, and that's the first time we hear of that.
Yeah.
And then it comes up again later.
Also, though, when did Fitz learn this random old language?
They probably told him his name and then, like, told him the meaning or something. There has to be some knowledgeable person out there.
Do they meet up and, like, teach him? You know what I mean? Like, is there secret meetings that he never writes down we don't know about?
All night, and they had to, like, memorize a bunch of words.
And he could do it, but...
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just reminds me of, like, King Killer... you haven't read it. The King Killer Chronicles, where the main character has to memorize a language in, like, half a day.
That sounds really hard.
But...
Coming from someone who's taken
do it too.
2+ years of college Spanish and still doesn't know anything. Yikes. Okay.
Well, we pick up where we left off with Fitz leaving the tower. He heads down to the stables. He knows that the trial is coming up, that he has to do this, and he went to Smithy and then to Sudi, and Burrich comes up on him with his, like, head down against the wall, and Burrich is just sighing audibly. He's like, well, now what? And I heard in his voice how weary he was of both me and my problems.
Okay, but is this just Fitz overthinking, or do you think Burrich actually was annoyed?
Both.
That's fair enough.
I think he's weary of having to console Fitz all the time.
That's fair.
Like,
you know, I could see... Although Burrich doesn't necessarily reprimand Fitz for having feelings, per se.
Right.
But I guess he probably is like, boy, if you don't get hold of your emotions, I'll give you something to cry about.
But they do have a discussion here that Fitz has really no hope of passing the test. And Burrich's like, well, nothing about it then. Just get yourself back here safe and we'll continue on. It's not like you weren't bad at, or weren't good at other lessons. You can just continue on with what you were doing before.
Well, yeah, and what's weird about this is Burrich knows a little bit of something because Galen has given him orders to get horses ready. But Fitz doesn't try to pry. He doesn't even want more information. And he says, I would prove myself fairly to Galen or not at all. And I just think it's interesting that even after everything he's been through, even knowing that Galen almost certainly isn't going to be fair, and later we learn definitely was not fair.
Right.
He's still saying, I'm going to do this the right way or I'm not going to do it. And I just find that really commendable. I think it's really cool that Fitz has that sense of right and wrong in him.
Yeah.
Even though the other side is playing dirty.
I mean, that's Burrich all the way.
True. But yeah, it's just interesting. And I mean, Burrich is really trying to help Fitz through this. And Fitz knows Burrich is disappointed. Mm-hmm. Although I'm not really sure if Burrich is actually disappointed in the idea that Fitz can't skill, or if that's another, like, Fitz is just sad, so...
Burrich's trying to make it seem like no big deal to... Yeah.
Which, you know, when there's someone younger than you and they're really upset about a thing and it kind of feels like that thing doesn't super matter. And you're just like, well, it'll be okay. And you want to treat it seriously, but not overindulge them in the sadness. And it kind of feels like that's what's happening. But maybe Burrich is a little disappointed because...
Yeah, maybe.
This will make him less than chivalry in some way.
And then Fitz asks him if he will take care of Smithy while he's gone, and Burrich asks a probing question of how much will that dog miss you while you're gone? And Fitz kind of avoids it. He's like, oh, well, I've been at other lessons before, so it'll probably be fine. And Burrich has a very strong suspicion, but he doesn't know for sure that Fitz is bonded to Smithy. But he's just kind of disappointed and kind of disgusted that Fitz won't just tell him.
Yeah.
Just won't, like, straight up talk to him.
Or admit
anything, yeah.
But also, he's not exactly creating the most shareable environment.
Oh, no.
So
Yes. That's not
I
Burrich.
don't know how he could expect any less. Fitz is talking with Smithy and explaining to him that he's going to be gone for a couple meals, but it's going to be okay. He'll be back. And Smithy is very sad and doesn't want him to go and wants to come with. And then Fitz, is struggling because he says, for a moment, I felt how right he was that I would need him to be able to survive this failure. But I reminded myself that he would be here, waiting for me when I returned, and I promised him several days of my time for his sole benefit when I returned.
I would take him on a long hunt, such as we had never had time for before.
Now, he suggested, and soon, I promised.
Yeah. And that never happens.
No. This is such a sad chapter, and this part is really hard.
First actual loss of a wit companion for Fitz.
But also the fact that he recognizes that he really needs Smithy, and Smithy is keeping him grounded, and I just feel so bad for him.
Hasn't come there yet, though.
Yeah.
Hasn't got there yet. The next morning comes, and they're off on the start of the test. There's a lot of, speeches and pomp and circumstance, but, like, only a few people show up, like families and gossips and stuff like that. And they're all soon blindfolded and shuffled out to various corners of the Six Duchies, or, a little bit away.
Yep.
And Fitz describes a very uncomfortable wagon trip where he's blindfolded and never gets to take off the blindfold, eats, sparse meals, and it's about, like, day and a half for him, journey-wise, in this cart. And he, gets let off the cart, and it just stays there for a while, and he's like, oh, I guess they left me. He takes off the blindfold and sees the cart and the horse and the man quickly retreating off in the distance. And he realizes that he is very close to Forge and has to go through Forge to return to Buckkeep.
Yep. And he tries really hard to tell himself that he is not scared.
Yeah. He's trying to convince himself. He also doesn't believe that the Forged ones are banding together at all.
Right.
He doesn't believe that rumor.
Well, because he doesn't think they're smart enough.
Right.
So, because to him, they are nothings. Because they don't have any feeling of humanity in them. And so, there can't possibly be a brain that works enough to band together.
Or even feelings enough to want to band together and not just destroy each other, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, he's supposed to stay 2 days in that area to wait for instructions. And, of course, that's an extremely dangerous area because forged ones.
He does say, which I think is kind of comical, that if Galen truly wanted to contact me, location should be no barrier. He had assured us innumerable times that it was the person he reached for, not the place. He could find me as well on the beach as he could on a hilltop. And I just thought that was kind of funny, the idea that Fitz is going to go sit on the beach or something and have a nice little vacation. But I don't think he is going to sit on the beach in a vacation-y way.
No, yeah, he was going to get his bearings, I think.
Yes, definitely. But I just thought it was like a funny idea that maybe he's going to like lay out and get a tan or something.
It does say that he quests out immediately when he realizes like he's in the wilderness because he's kind of scared and he doesn't see anything, and he relaxes, and then he realizes obviously the forged ones aren't sensed by him. Mm-hmm. And it just is another point hammered in that he relies on his wit immediately for all of his senses.
Yep. And it's really interesting that he is so scared and yet he doesn't try to leave.
Right.
This is a horrible, like, obviously he was put here to hope that a forged one would attack him and he would die. And he stays and waits and hunkers down in a little place where he can have something behind his back so he doesn't feel so out in the open. And he just hopes to hear Galen.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine doing that. I feel like I'm a wimp and I would just head back immediately.
I had no belief he would really try to contact me, let alone that I would receive any clear impressions if he did. And then he waits and waits, and eventually, it falls to evening, and he says either he hadn't called or I hadn't heard him. So he eats, and he feels cheated out, and he's like, Galen definitely, wouldn't let me even prove myself, and everything like this, and he tries to fall asleep. And he starts to dream. And I thought these dreams were extremely interesting. Okay. I don't know if you kind of read into them at all or just dismissed them until you got to the last one.
I kind of dismissed them, but now that you're saying there's more to it, I'd like to hear.
So it starts out and it says, Regal stood over me and I was a child sleeping in straw again. He laughed and held a knife. Verity shrugged and smiled apologetically at me. Jade turned aside from me, disappointed. Molly smiled at Jade past me, forgetting I was there. Burrich held me by the shirt front and shook me, telling me to behave like a man, not a beast. But I lay down on straw and an old shirt, chewing at a bone. The meat was very good, and I could think of nothing else. That paragraph right there pretty much all lines up with when he dies and is in night eyes, and then comes back. So Regal is very happy he's killed Fitz. Mm-hmm. Verity has gone off on his adventure, and even before that, he always dismisses Regal's like, oh, he's family, don't worry about him, he's nothing, we gotta focus on the red ships. Like, right. He's just, I'm not gonna do anything. Jade is disappointed that he's not snapping out of his, like, acting like a wolf. Mm-hmm. But the turning aside from me, like, he doesn't come back to help Burrich very much after the first, like, month or something of rehabbing.
Right.
Molly, this part is a stretch, and I think all of this is a stretch, but I think it kind of lines up.
Sure.
Molly smiled at Jade past me, forgetting I was there. And in his mind, I think this paragraph is slightly prophetic because she starts to have a relationship with Burrich, just helping each other, obviously, to begin with. But his prophetic dream mind fills in Jade because that's who he's been thinking about with Molly. Mm-hmm. And that's all he can think about with Molly right now.
Right.
But also at the end of the chapter, he sees Jade and Molly together. Mm-hmm. And they're walking off together, and he gets really drunk.
Yes.
And then this last sentence, the last part, is the most telling one is Burrich held me by the shirt front and shook me, telling me not to behave like a man, not a beast. I lay down on straw in an old shirt, chewing at a bone. And I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of passages describing, he didn't want to wear a shirt because, it wasn't his natural state anymore, like what Fitz was thinking after he came out of Night Eyes back into his own body. He liked to chew on bones. He just curled up by the fire. Burrich was, in between, like, begging him and yelling at him and just trying different things to get him out. I think that's this whole small paragraph hints at what might be to come, like what might be coming. And I thought it was kind of interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of stretch for some of those, obviously, but we know there are prophetic dreamers, and obviously that's more ascribed to, like, whites in general, but
right.
Since he has two magics very strongly, I don't know.
Maybe he can partially tell.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair, because really all of life is just, tied together through the stream of magic and...
Yeah. The skill especially.
Yeah, the skill stream kind of ties past and present together, so I don't see how he couldn't accidentally tap into that.
And he's been trying to be open to the skill the whole night.
Right, but also using his wit extensively to stretch out and make sure nothing's coming towards him. So yeah, maybe he accidentally saw a glimpse in the future.
But then the unfortunate dream comes, the actual true dream, where he is, I think, through his wit connection, linked with the skill to Smithy, because he's seeing through Smithy's eyes.
Right.
And someone comes into the stable, and it's Burrich. He smells like Burrich and ale. He's probably been drinking, had a nice little night out. He's probably worried about Fitz. And he starts to walk up the stairs, and Smithy hears a scuffle and people falling down, and smells Burrich's blood. Burrich was stabbed and fell down the steps, and Smithy jumps at the attacker and latches on, and the attacker knifes Smithy.
Yep.
And Smithy is calling, "Boy, boy." I called for help. I felt him with me, but he didn't come. The intruder kicked me, but I wouldn't let go. Burrich lay in the straw, and I smelled his blood. He did not move. I snarled around the mouthful. I heard old Vixen flinging herself against the door upstairs, trying vainly to get to her master. Which is another hint that Vixen is probably bonded with Burrich, but he, like, blocks all the communication. Again and again, the knife plunged into me. I cried out to my boy a last time, and then I could no longer hold on. I was flung off the kicking leg to strike the side of a stall. I was drowning, blood in my mouth and nostrils, running feet, pain in the dark. I hitched closer to Burrich. I pushed my nose under his hand. He did not move. Voices and light coming. And Fitz wakes up.
Yeah.
And he knows. He knows what he was doing. He knows what he saw. He knows that it was true.
Yeah.
He reaches out to Smithy, and Smithy acknowledges that contact, but Fitz realizes how much it took out of Smithy, how much energy. So he just kind of keeps the contact, but puts him to the side of his mind.
Yeah.
And just reassures him that he's coming.
Right. And he decides in that moment that he's going to have to go. And he doesn't run because a steady march would carry me farther and faster than a mad sprint through the dark. He knows which direction to go. He knows what to do. and he's trying to reconcile because, this is a big decision. If he just goes and leaves everything for Smithy and Burrich, that's it. That's the end. There's no more skill. There isn't a second test. But he says when it was all put in the balance, the skill was far outweighed by Smithy and Burrich.
Yeah. Because in order to maintain that hold on Smithy, he's not open enough to receive any instructions.
Right.
So he just has to choose. And then he asks why Burrich, who would hate him enough to ambush him. And as he continued his march, he thinks about this as if he were talking it through with Chade. Considers all the options, and of course his mind immediately leaps to Galen. And then he's like, oh, I just want it to be Galen. I don't know, all the facts. Would he do it himself? Would he hire someone? I don't know. I just don't know enough. But I'm pretty sure it is Galen. And
right.
I'm pretty sure he hired somebody.
Yeah.
And mainly because he thinks that Burrich is giving Fitz strength.
Right. He thinks that that's why Fitz is good at the skill.
And he wants Fitz out of the way. He doesn't want him to come back from this test. So, he tries to get rid of supposedly Fitz's strength. And it works. Just not how Galen thought it was.
True. But at this point, do we really think Galen ever even skilled out to Fitz to begin with?
I think he did, but just to, make sure he was out there. I think he checked in and just was like, okay, he's there, but never, tried to make contact.
He wouldn't be able to tell if Fitz was there, if his wall was up, right?
I think you can still find somebody. You just can't get in their head.
Well, then...
Right?
Why would he have told everybody he was dead?
Well, Galen didn't tell everybody he was dead. I think everybody assumed that he was dead because
everybody else
showed up days before.
I don't know. He just seems so upset that Fitz is actually alive. That makes me think that he doesn't know. We know he's not a very strong skiller. I don't know. I don't know if he can reach... I don't think he ever... I guess then the king would know that he didn't, right?
Yeah.
Because the king can feel... But does the king care enough to say anything about it? I don't know. Because also everybody knows that every other person had a horse to ride back on, and Fitz comes back on foot. So even if...
Well, everybody doesn't know that. Burrich knows that because he's the stable master. Yeah, everything in this chapter is kind of a blur because so many other things happen that some of those details we don't really know. And I could definitely see Galen not reaching out, and I could definitely see him checking in to see if Fitz was just going to be by Forge and if he got where he was dangerously supposed to be put and that sort of thing.
I guess.
And then when he was holding on to the wit connection, Galen couldn't find him anymore because he wasn't somewhat open because he isn't as strong. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, anyway, regardless, Fitz chooses to go help Smithy and Burrich.
Yeah, definitely. And he is thinking and walking and eating. It's another day now, so this is the second day, and he's walking along, describing, I knew the road would take me right through Forge. I did not relish the idea, but the warm thread of Smithy's life tugged me on. And I lifted my head to the scuff of feet against stone. And he's confronted by Forged ones.
Right before he's confronted, he does have a little small thought paragraph about Burrich and what it means that Burrich is hurt this way and how he's never had to reconcile. He didn't even think Burrich could be hurt. It's...
We all think our parents are invincible until something happens.
Yeah. And so I just thought that was a really interesting... where he just feels hollow and weary. And because Burrich is hurt. And this is such an interesting chapter because he really struggles with adding Burrich on to his care for Smithy.
Yep.
And it's always Smithy, period, Burrich, next thought. Which is so weird. It's like he doesn't want to admit that he cares about Burrich and that Burrich is important to him.
Because they hold such different values, and I don't know, I feel like Fitz doesn't want to associate with him with Smithy because Burrich doesn't want to be associated with Smithy or Fitz if he does.
That's fair.
If he uses the wit, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like hard to put them in the same thought for him.
Oh, I like that thought. Anyway, so he gets attacked.
Yeah, and he is hitting their like wrists and their ankles because he has a stick.
And there's 3 of them and 1 of him.
Yep. And trying to keep him back. And he knows that he's tired and they're probably hungry and they'll just pursue him until Fitz drops. So that's not really an option, is just to run. Mm-hmm. So he talks to them. He's like, "What do you want?" And they're like, "I don't know. Oh, what do you have?" So he's surprised that they can actually talk, first of all. Dead men talking, I thought to myself, and couldn't stop the thought from echoing through my mind.
Well, it's probably even weirder after, he just hit somebody and for the first time ever has no sense of the pain he's causing the other person.
Right. Yeah.
And no echoes of his anger or fear. It's like slamming a door, violence without a victim. And I just think it's such a weird...
Which is also... It really brings up a great thought of why Fitz doesn't like killing people.
Yeah.
It's because he can feel that.
Yeah. He feels their death.
Yeah. Because he's with it.
Yeah. Also, fighting would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because...
That's why he goes into a battle rage.
Yeah.
That's why I'm sure Burrich did, too, when he was a soldier. Like, your body protects you from that pain and just blacks you out.
Yeah. I guess that would be so weird. You'd probably get everybody else's adrenaline from dying. And so even if you weren't injured, you'd get that. Because whenever you're hurt, your body, to save you, gives you adrenaline. It's why mothers can lift cars off of their babies. Like, so I don't know. But yeah.
But the way this is written is wonderful. Because it's going through Fitz's head for, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, and then all of a sudden you're in the middle of a confrontation and you kind of get as startled as Fitz was. Mm-hmm. Like, you're just like, oh, there's forged ones here now. Okay, here we go. So they're having this conversation and Fitz is like, I have nothing. I lost all my things back down the road. He's trying to lure them away when he realizes they can talk. He's like, maybe that can like trick them.
Yeah, can reason with them.
Yeah, and this one forged one is like, cloak. I want your cloak.
Well, not only that, but he realizes that one of them is a woman. Mm-hmm. He didn't know until this point, which is such a strange, like, how much does he really not use his eyes?
Maybe they're just that dirty, and he was just kind of like that panicked.
I guess, yeah.
But yeah, also, he does not use his observational skills.
He needs to use the wit that much of a crutch that he doesn't even know. I don't know. So weird.
But he's still like hitting them and like just to keep them back while he's thinking, and they're looking like puzzled down at their wrists and their ankles, like, why are you doing this? Like, it doesn't even hurt them, so they can't really feel that much pain, but they recognize it as something that's not good because she steps back and tries to snatch the stick.
Is it that she can't feel the pain?
I mean, it says
he can't feel their pain because they don't have the thing that makes them human anymore. But that doesn't mean they can't feel pain. They scream out when they get hit.
She glanced down at the injury as if puzzled, and then continued to limp after me. I feel like something has to be dulled there because he cracked her on the shin with a branch, and she just kind of like looked down at it and then continued to walk. I don't know. I feel like some sort of that pain response has to be changed.
I guess, but the guy before, I dealt him another quick jolt to his back. He yelled louder and thrashed about.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of...
Maybe it's like they can't grasp the pain or something. I don't know.
I mean, they were human ones, so maybe their brains are like, you recognize this as pain. That's why she's looking at it puzzled, like, oh, maybe it doesn't pain me. Like, why doesn't this hurt? And the other guy's like, his brain is like, this hurts, scream. I don't know.
I don't know either.
And he sees that they're like, I want the cloak, but like the other person is like, no, it's mine. And the other person's like, no, it'll be mine. I'll kill you too. Talking to everybody there. And he knows that they're banding together, but like he can distract them. So he runs and then is trying to unfasten his cloak. And when he does so, they reach it and all fight each other for it.
Right.
He keeps running and eventually hides off on the side of the road and miraculously falls asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes back awake, and this is like now the third day, and everybody we know has had horses, and they're probably back at Buckkeep because this is, 2 days. They would have been contacted, and they can just ride back.
Right. Well, and this was a 1.5 day long ride to get where he was.
Yeah.
And that's all day, all night. It doesn't say he got to stop to sleep. So, like, all day, all night riding in a, like, carriage with a horse. So, walking is going to take forever, basically.
Yeah. So he continues towards Forge, basically. He still has Smithy's life in his mind. It says it's the barest tendril. And I think the only emotion still active in me was the fear that kept me looking over my shoulder and scanning the woods to either side as I walked. And it was full dark when I arrived on the hillside overlooking Forge. For some time I stood looking down on it, seeking for any signs of life, and then I forced myself to walk on. And it's empty. Forge is pretty much abandoned. There's nothing going on, no smoke, no signs of recent inhabitants. And he sees a red ship sail in, and he has to hide himself.
Yeah.
Like, that's got to be terrifying. Like, you're like, okay, I'm getting through this thing. I'm looking out for these Forge ones because I'm terrified. And then all of a sudden, this other threat comes.
Yeah. And now it's a real threat, something you probably haven't been thinking about because it wasn't real to you. You didn't have to face it. And now all of a sudden, there it is.
Yeah. It's crazy. And then he realizes that they definitely come here often to restock their water because they know the positioning, they know where to dock. It's directly across from the well.
Mm-hmm.
They speak in a language similar but harsher, so it's just all very jarring to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, in my mind, Jade is telling me poison the well before you leave, but I didn't have anything, and I was just kind of worried about Smithy. So it says like they're incredibly close by when they dock and where he's hiding,
mm-hmm.
and they're obviously going to stay for a while. So he's like laying down and like crawling with the waves crashing.
Yeah.
For like hours.
Yep.
That's exhausting and crazy.
Yeah, and also he knows that they probably just got done attacking somewhere close by because they don't want to light a fire in case somebody followed them, and they also have enough supplies to have food to cook on a fire.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So he continues that for a long time and then eventually makes it to the road, and he stands up and quests after Smithy and continues on. Another danger averted here, but now he knows that the red ships regularly come into Forge to resupply and to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And he's hungry, cold, tired. He has wet shoes. He had no thought of stopping, though.
No.
I trotted like a wolf, my eyes continually shifting, my ears keen for any sound behind me.
I know.
Thought that was a little cute.
Yeah, I did too. But then, all of a sudden...
Yeah. One moment the road was empty and black before me. In the next, the darkness had turned to men. two before me, and when I spun about, another behind me. Slapping waves had covered the sound of their feet. I set my back to the solid wall of the warehouse, readied my staff, and waited. And it wasn't the raiders, because he couldn't feel them. They didn't raise shouts of alarm.
Mm-hmm.
It was the forged ones, and one of them was the woman from the previous night. One of them has a knife, and he has a staff, and he was trained to use it, so they were thin, ragged, and at least as hungry as he, and as cold. They closed on me so silently. I guess they were aware of the raiders and feared them as much as I did. It was not good to consider the desperation that would prompt them to still attack me. But in the next breath, I wondered if forged ones felt desperation or anything else. Perhaps they were too dulled to realize the danger. And here comes the
worst part of the whole chapter.
The sad part. For as the first two stepped into my range, I felt the tiny warmth that was Smithy ebbing in my grasp. "Smithy," I whispered, a desperate plea that he somehow stay with me. I all but saw a tail tip stir in a last effort at a wag. Then the thread snapped and the spark blinked out. I was alone. A black flood of strength surged through me like a madness. Oh, Smithy.
That's so sad. I'm like tearing up. I cried when I read it earlier. I'm tearing up now.
He's such a good pup.
I know. And he wags his tail when the... Ugh. That's just so sad.
And then we get the first berserker rage that Fitz goes into.
Mm-hmm.
Rightfully triggered by his wit companion's death.
Right.
Where he quickly stabs his staff into the head of one, shears off the jaw of another, and then grapples and gouges the eyes and kills the third with his hands.
Which, how strong is he? Because, I mean, first of all, he's probably weakened at this point because he hasn't been training as heavily like he was before with a weapon.
Yeah.
So he's not even at full strength capacity. And he still is using a blunt stick, basically, to stab through someone and then cut off the jaw of another person. Like, that's so much force to do that. That's
Black rage.
Crazy.
Yeah. So he throws the body down onto the rocks and he stood panting, just kind of daring the raiders to come to him, like looking at Forge, seeing if there's alarms raised, because he's angry. He's upset.
Mm-hmm.
He's devastated.
He's kind of daring them to fight him too.
Yeah. Well, he left the bodies and walked away. He felt nothing from them when he killed them. No fear, no anger, no pain, not even despair. They had been things. And as I began my long walk back to Buckkeep, I finally felt nothing from within myself. Perhaps, I thought, forging is a contagion and I have caught it now. I could not bring myself to care. And he says little of that journey stands out in his mind. He encountered no more forged ones, and he encountered a few other travelers, but no one, he nor the other travelers, were interested in talking to strangers.
Right.
And his only thoughts were of getting back to Buckkeep. He still had Burrich on his mind.
Yeah.
He was still going back for him. And he shows up 2 days into the Spring Fest celebration. And the guards recognize him.
Yeah.
And quickly tell him that Burrich's been hurt and to send him on to the infirmary.
And then we learned that Fitz has never been to the infirmary himself because Burrich and no one else had always treated his childhood illnesses and mishaps. But he knows where it is, so he goes.
And it's got to be such a crazy scene. He has such turmoil inside of him. He lost his best friend, his father basically is grievously injured.
And he doesn't know how injured.
He doesn't know how injured. Yeah. And he's walking through a festival. And it says, I pushed myself through the people with their bells and flowers and sweet cakes. It must be so happy in there right now.
Mm-hmm.
The folk have been harried from the red ships. They're, they don't know what's going on. So they'll take their time to celebrate and try to be happy. And Fitz is only sad, angry, depressed, walking through.
Yeah. It says, and suddenly I felt as if I were 6 years old and come to Buckkeep for the very first time. I had hung on to Burrich's belt, all that long way from Moon's Eye, with his leg torn and bandaged, but not once had he put me on another's horse, or entrusted my care to another.
'Cause he came to Buckkeep during a festival as well. And Burrich was injured, but he never went to the infirmary. This time it's worse. And Burrich is the only one in there.
Yeah. Well, because everybody else that can be let out is for the celebration.
Mm-hmm. I took his hand. Fitz, he said without opening his eyes. He gripped my hand hard. Yes. You're back. You're alive. I am. I came straight here as fast as I could. Oh, Burrich, I feared you were dead. I thought you were dead. The others all came back days ago. He took a ragged breath. Of course, the bastard left horses with all the others. No, I reminded him, not letting go of his hand. I'm the bastard, remember? Sorry. And he opens his eyes and comments that they look a fine pair because they're both beat up. And he tells Burrich that he set him down north of Forge, and Burrich, of course, is really angry. He tried to make him tell him, he tried to make Galen tell him where Galen put down Fitz. Tried to send a message to Verity, and he didn't get a response back. And we know that's because Verity is probably skilling the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And then he says, I should kill him. And Fitz says, let it go. I said and meant it. I'm back and alive. I failed his test, but it didn't kill me. And as you told me, there are other things in my life. This is so weird to hear coming out of Fitz because we know how upset he is.
Yeah.
And he just lost Smithy. And do you think he really believes what he says? I mean, we know it's true that there are other things and that he should be able to move on, but do you think he's just saying this for Burrich's benefit to kind of convince him to leave it?
Probably partially. He says later in this conversation too that he doesn't have the skill, so I feel like something else with the skill command that he got from Galen is kind of messing with his head, that like since he failed he literally doesn't have it, so he should just leave it alone. It's like done. It's not a part of his life anymore. I don't know. It feels so abrupt. You're right in that he's just like, no, leave it. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, at first I kind of was thinking, well, of course, because Galen sent somebody to kill Burrich, and if he keeps on this path, maybe Burrich will die.
True.
But he doesn't realize that Galen is for sure the one who sent this. He, at this point, still doesn't know why Burrich has been attacked. So I don't know that it is in consideration for Burrich per se, which is so weird. Like, so why is he all of a sudden like, well, it's in the past, I'm done, I don't need to fight it anymore.
Yeah. And Burrich kind of describes the attack just briefly. Like, I got jumped, knifed, fell down the stairs, and I was senseless for 2 days. And then Burrich says, and Fitz, your dog, a stupid, senseless thing, but he killed your dog. I know. He died quickly, Burrich said, as if to be a comfort. I stiffened at the lie. He died well, I corrected him. And if he hadn't, you'd have had that knife in you more than once. Burrich grew very still. You were there, weren't you? He said at last. It was not a question, and there was no mistaking his meaning. Yes, I heard myself saying, simply. You were there with the dog that night, instead of trying for the skill? His voice rose in outrage. Burrich, it wasn't like... He pulled his hand free of mine and turned as far away from me as he could. Leave me.
Yeah, this part is really hard to read.
Before I said that Fitz was through the wit, like skilling into Smithy's mind. Do you think it was just the wit? Does he do that with Night Eyes with just the wit later on, or
he does use Night Eye's eyes, and
yeah.
I think we know that other people, the guy with the bird, he uses the bird's eyes sometimes, or at least knows what the bird sees. I guess that could just be conveyed through talk. Web, yes, thank you. That could just be something that's conveyed through talk.
Yeah.
But this is a consistent ability of Fitz's. I guess just because Fitz can do it doesn't mean it is a wit thing.
Right.
Because Fitz also sees through the eyes of Nettle later.
Yeah, I think it's a skill thing. Like a combination thing.
Yeah. Like he's using them both together to do.
Okay, I just want to clarify that before that.
Yeah.
Before we went through. So Fitz tries to explain. He's like, it wasn't Smithy, like it wasn't my dog. My wit is not the reason that I failed. I just don't have the skill. So let me have what I do have. Let me be what I am. I don't use this in a bad way. Even without it, I'm good with animals. You force me to be. If I can use it, I can. And Burrich has his ultimatum. You stay out of my stables. Stay away from me. He rolled back to face me, and to my amazement, a single tear tracked his dark cheek. You failed? No, Fitz. I failed. I was too soft-hearted to beat it out of you at the first sign of it. Raise him well, chivalry said to me. His last command to me. And I failed him. And you. If you hadn't meddled with the wit, Fitz, you'd have been able to learn the skill. Galen would have been able to teach you. No wonder he sent you to forge. He paused. Bastard or no, you could have been a fit son to chivalry, but you threw it all away. For what? A dog. I know what a dog can be to a man, but you don't throw your life over for not just a dog, I cut in almost harshly, Smithy, my friend. And it wasn't only him. I gave up the weight and came back for you, thinking you might need me. Smithy died days ago. I knew that. But I came back for you, thinking you might need me. You needn't have, he said quietly. I'd take care of myself, and harsher. You know that. I always have. And me, I admitted to him. And you've always taken care of me. Small damn good that did either of us, he said slowly. Look what I've let you become. Now you're just... Go away. Just go away. Bring me nothing. Do me no favors. Go your own way, and be whatever you will. I'm done with you. In his voice was no mercy for either of us.
Ugh.
That's a bigger loss than Smithy for Fitz.
Yeah. Well, this is basically the man who raised him.
Yeah.
And this is so hard. And I think in that last line, in his voice was no mercy for either of us.
This is killing Burrich, too.
Yeah. This is Burrich punishing himself. This isn't... Maybe on some level it's also to punish Fitz, but I think it's more to punish himself.
Chivalry's last command to him was to raise him well, and in Burrich's mind, he failed him, which means he failed Chivalry's legacy.
Yeah. Well, because he can't wrap his mind around why Fitz would throw away the skill, which is so prestigious and such a huge gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it computes when Fitz says, it's for you. It wasn't about Smithy. I thought you needed me. I think he's not listening. I think he's just thinking he's turning into a beast. He was in the dog instead of, like, he couldn't help himself. He just had to be in the dog. And we know that that's not how it is at all, and how it was more an accident than anything. But Burrich doesn't, and he doesn't really want to hear any positives about it.
Right. No. Even if he knew that it was not on purpose, he wouldn't care.
Right.
Just bonding him in general was, I don't know.
And it's just so sad. And and just the things that he says to Fitz, and it, in a way, it kind of makes me think of, like, those old-timey movies where they're trying to get the dog to run away, or the horse, like in Spirit, where they're trying to get the Spirit to run away. And they're like, go on, get, I hate you, you know, and they're like yelling at the animal that they hate them, even though they definitely don't. That's what this feels like. This feels like, I'm gonna say mean things because then you won't miss me, because I don't deserve to have you around anymore. Especially when he said, no wonder Galen sent you to Forge.
Yeah.
Like, that was really harsh to me.
Well, I mean, Burrich has already said that I'd rather you were forged than use the wit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he reviles it that much.
And he kind of doesn't blame Galen. And that's the worst part, is, like, Galen doesn't know about the wit. He just does. At this point, he doesn't. And so it's not even about that. It's just his hate for Fitz. But Burrich can't just accept that Galen hates Fitz. It has to be because of the wit. Because that's...
No, I don't think that is the reason why Burrich thinks Galen hates him. Because he knows that he hates him before he even teaches him. He just thinks that the wit prevented him from skilling. Which it does.
Right.
But it's like, you used this during the test and came for me disobeying the skill test rules for the wit, for a dog. Burrich just has no tolerance for it. And I mean, the way that he was raised, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And what he went through. But man, having this from Fitz's perspective is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. But also... Okay, there's a line when Fitz says he came back for Burrich. He says, you needn't have. I take care of myself. And then harsher, you know that. I always have. Do you think he feels like it's a weakness of his own that Fitz thought he needed to be taken care of?
Yeah, I think so. It's also, like, probably partially yelling at himself to, like, I don't need this boy with me. I can take care of myself. Trying to delude himself to lie.
Yeah. I don't know. This is just so hard. It's so hard to read and so sad.
Yeah.
I mean...
This is like... And this isn't even the saddest and... worst conversation between Fitz and Burrich that they have, because there's that one in the later trilogies that's worse. But
I just it's so hard for me because, like, Burrich just really, I don't know, he cannot reconcile this part of Fitz, and he doesn't realize that all he's doing is pushing Fitz further away, and Fitz is sitting here finally realizing Burrich is more important to me than this skill that I've been training months for, that I have been wanting so badly. And then it's thrown right back in his face. He opened himself up to Burrich. He put down some of his walls that he had built between them and said, why can't you just accept me for me? I'm going to do this thing, but I can help you by using it. And I'm not being bad. I'm not being a bad person. This doesn't make me bad. It's just who I am. And I love you, and you're my dad, and I want to help you. And Burrich is just, no, 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 no. He's building that wall back. And it's just, ugh.
Because in his mind, the wit is that bad. It will make you a beast. It will, if he continues to use it, if he's around Burrich's stables, that's just more temptation. And he does care for Fitz. He cares for him so deeply that he feels as if he failed him. And he even allows him to use the wit and comes back to him later in the series. It's just, man, this whole conversation is so hard.
Yeah.
And it says, that was my return to Buckkeep. I was a different creature from the naif who had left. Little fanfare was made over my not being dead as supposed. I made no opportunity for anyone to do so. From Burrich's bed, I went straight to my room. I ate at night, alone, in the kitchens. Slept, but not well. Penned one note to King Shrewd saying that the raiders were restocking at Forge.
Mm-hmm. It does say that one other person didn't make it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even remember who it was. And then it says the line, like Galen, I suppose I dismissed him as insignificant.
Yeah.
So
he still has that conditioning.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
Yeah. And then Galen himself only speaks to him once that summer.
Yep.
It isn't even directly to him, but I just want to quickly point out. So it says, he was walking and talking with Regal. As they passed me, he looked at me over Regal's head and said sneeringly, more lives than a cat. So that means Regal is short. Just pointing that out there. Or at least...
Galen's really tall, I thought, because he's like tall, skinny.
Well, yeah, but hear me out. What if Regal's just really short and that's why he is such a bad person? Not that short guys are all awful. I have many short guy friends and I love them all. They're great.
Gosh.
But Napoleon syndrome or whatever. Maybe he's the stereotype.
Napoleon complex?
Yes.
Wow, Emma.
But I'm just saying, I feel like Regal would be one of those guys who would be very insecure about his height.
Not very tall either, Emma.
Okay, well, that's fine.
No,
I wish
he probably
I was tall.
would. If he was short, he probably would be
super insecure about it. So I would like to make fun of his insecurities because he's a trash person.
But also, I think Galen is pretty tall.
But
I think
tall
it's
enough to look over Regal's head? That means he's like at least a head taller. Which means Regal can't be that tall, is what I'm saying. Like, if you can look over someone's head at something, as someone who is short and has many people look over my head at everything, gotta be kind of short to do that. I don't know. I'm just saying. I just never thought of Regal as short, and I think this changed my mind.
You're going to picture him as like Lord Farquaad or something?
Yes, exactly. He is Lord Farquaad, but a little bit better looking. He is a Farseer, after all.
Yeah. It seemed to me that I had lost everything when I lost Smithy, or perhaps in my bitterness I set out to destroy what little was left to me. I sulked about the keep for weeks, cleverly insulting anyone foolish enough to speak to me. Jade didn't summon him, Fool avoided him, saw Patience 3 times. First 2 times, he made the barest efforts to be civil, he recounts, and then the 3rd time he just rose up in the middle of it and walked away.
And she didn't summon him again.
Yeah. After 2 months, he felt like he needed to reach out to somebody. He had chance encounters with Burrich, but they were incredibly awkward, and they both learned painfully to pretend not to see one another. Mm-hmm. So after these 2 months, he kind of ventures down to town after a while, after wanting to for a while.
Yeah, it says that he's been really thinking about this. He wants to go to Molly to tell her everything. He wants to lay it all bare. And he has this whole imagined scenario where They would sit on the beach and he would talk to her. And then when I was done, she would not judge me or try to offer advice, but would just take my hand and be still beside me. Finally, someone would know everything, and I would not have to hide anything from her anymore. And she wouldn't turn away. I dared imagine no more beyond that.
And that's what he did for Molly before, when she kind of made the joke and was talking about her father and stuff, and he just kind of looked at her, not wanting to laugh at her half joke, and said thank you.
Yes.
That's that comfort that Fitz wants.
And also, he wants to tell somebody everything.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to hide. And I think this coming problem where he decides not to tell Molly, he never really gets to a spot completely where he can tell her ever again.
No, because she finds out things and confronts him, and
then he talks about it once she knows about it.
Yeah.
But he never again truly opens up to anyone except the Fool. The Fool's really the only person who gets all of Fitz. And maybe partially Starling, but not as much.
Everything.
She knows more than
Night Eyes gets pretty much everything.
Yeah. But it's just, he wants to be open. And I guess I didn't realize how much he wanted that.
Yeah.
Until rereading this part. And he just wants to be accepted. He doesn't even care if she doesn't love him afterwards. He just wants somebody to say it's okay.
And so he does venture down, but with a picnic basket, with wine, with everything that he'd need to execute this plan, just to tell her. And he sees her leaving the chandlery with Jade. And she's leaning on his arm. And Molly was suddenly a woman, one I did not know. The 2-year age difference between us was a vast gulf I could never hope to bridge. He steps around the corner before she could see me and turned aside, face down.
Yeah. It also, on his way, it says, but in the end, all decisions had already been made, and they had nothing to do with me. Fitz continues to believe this. He doesn't think that if he stepped in right now, anything would change. And I disagree. I think if he would have come forward, there is a slight possibility Molly could have, maybe seen him and said, oh, maybe something would have changed. Maybe nothing would have. Yeah. But Fitz just accepts things without even trying to change them. And I think that's one of the things that frustrates me about him. It was already decided without me. Yeah. No, Fitz. You can't just let everything pass you by and not try to change things. Which is amazing that just him being alive and doing what little things he does changes the course of everything. When he's such a passive person, he just really will not. Which, granted, every time he tries to speak out, it doesn't really work out so well. But, he's just so passive.
That night, I got drunker than I had ever been, and awoke the next day in some bushes halfway up the Keep Road. He's in a rough place right now. That's the end of the chapter. That's where we leave off with Fitz. So much heartbreak, not even any end to it at the moment, just deeper and deeper. He feels like he's losing everybody in his life, and again, he's alone.
Yeah.
He's not doing good.
No, he's not.
Poor Smithy, poor Burrich, poor Fitz, poor Molly, because he doesn't understand.
But I mean, to be fair, she might be happy right now.
Oh yeah, no. Poor Molly, as in the confrontation that she has to explain things to Fitz later.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, if you'd like to reach out to us to discuss further on any of these relationships, any things that happen, Burrich's talk with him, the masks of the pillars, please email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com or any of our socials. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the messages we got over the week. So first of all, on Instagram, we got a message from Sarah, who talked to us a little bit about her thoughts on the skill and the wit. She talked a lot about how she thinks the skill and the wit were possibly from dragons, and went over just how the skill is more of a specific command capability.
Well, the wit is pretty broad.
Yeah, the wit is more of a feeling.
Yeah.
But then she also asks some pretty interesting questions of, can the skill be directed at animals, or can humans bond with humans in the wit?
Yeah.
Because we're told that the wit is specifically beast-based, but Fitz can use his wit abilities on humans.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a super interesting conversation, and I think it's a little bit too hard to fully dive into at the end of an episode. I feel like we need to do a full episode eventually somewhere out in the years of doing this series where we just discuss the magic.
Yeah.
And try to discuss theories on that. But it's, really interesting questions are raised about when you think about the wit and the skill and where they come from, and if they're two sides of the same coin or just opposites and magics that exist in the world. I don't know.
Right. I know, it's just a really interesting thought. But I really did like the thought of, can humans bond with humans?
Yeah. Can you skill at an animal?
Yeah.
Which I think you can.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's any examples.
Yeah, and she does talk about how, like, aren't humans kind of animals? And aren't dragons kind of
animals?
And you can skill and wit talk with... You can skill talk with dragons, so... I don't know.
But she also says that I'm secretly hoping Robin Hobb is writing more books where the magic system will be explained a bit better, because there's still a lot of room for interpretation. Same.
Yup.
Same here. I would love that. Although I feel like since Robin Hobb doesn't even have a glossary of how you're supposed to pronounce names and leaves that up to interpretation, I feel like her magic system won't be explained fully either. I just want more books in this world in general, so. Another message we got was from Michelle on Instagram, just kind of talking about our conversation where Galen is talking about who Fitz might be drawing power from and who Fitz was hiding, and her mind immediately went to Smithy, and that I thought was a really good theory as well. That's what came to my mind the first time I read it, and then just rereading it in depth as we have been, I realized, like, the fight happened before with Burrich. Galen knows Burrich's relationship with chivalry and that he was probably a king's man and everything like that, so it kind of linked those two, that Galen immediately suspected Burrich there.
Yeah.
But it also could happen where he was in Fitz's mind and he could tell Fitz was hiding something / someone, and it was Smithy, but Galen doesn't know, so just assumed it was Burrich.
Right. Well, because he doesn't know that Fitz is witted yet.
Yeah.
So.
Because I feel like Galen, with his history with witted and old-blooded people, would immediately try to take public.
Right. And
justice.
To be fair, I feel like the skill, when you're skill reading someone's mind, is very broad. It's not like you can read my thoughts unless I'm specifically speaking to you, but it's more of images flashing through your head. And so maybe if there was an image of Smithy, it would be tinged with Burrich because of the fear that Burrich's going to find out about Smithy.
Right.
And that wouldn't necessarily have connotations of the wit because it could just be a young boy not wanting his dad to find out he has a dog. Like, so then he would, like, have that strength be more centered towards Burrich in some way, I think. But I don't know. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, I think, though, that Galen suspects Burrich there and is talking about Burrich because then immediately after Burrich is attacked.
Yeah.
So, but it is a super interesting thought. But I still think if he suspected Smithy or being witted, that he would bring it up publicly.
Yeah.
So, I don't think Fitz is out yet with that secret.
Right. So finally, we got an email from Leah. And Leah was just popping in to talk about how Fitz could potentially be a bisexual character. And this could be not something that's expressly said because in this culture it doesn't really seem like really any sort of homosexuality is accepted, just because we don't really see it at all.
Yeah, anything like I think considered deviant besides the skill and like besides like the magic things, accepting the wit because the wit is reviled at this point.
Yeah,
but anything other is not considered okay,
right?
And is repressed and.
Yeah, and it's not really talked about.
Yeah.
We know that there's negative connotations between men sleeping together because of Lord Golden and Tom later on. And just the reactions to that kind of makes it seem as though it's not looked highly upon.
Or proper or anything.
Or proper in their town. But also, she points out that the Fool says... the importance that you, the people of the Six Duchies, attach to what gender is like a thing that he's upset about. He like, why do you guys care so much whose anybody's gender is? Why does it matter? Yeah. And even though there are some like strides towards better treatment of all people, I mean, women don't have to just be in ladylike roles in this society. It's still not as progressive. And so if you were someone who did like women and you're a man, if you had some feelings for men, it would be easier to ignore because the norm is liking women. And Who are you going to talk to about these feelings? Maybe it's just a really deep friendship. And the story could be him coming to realize that without having a word for it. Because he doesn't really, it's not really something you can talk about in this society, it feels like. And
this relationship and realizations really do develop over all of these books. It takes a long time. So we'll probably be touching on that topic throughout the whole podcast series and all of the books that we discuss because it is such a intricate feeling and intricate thought process for Fitz, and he has a lot of different feelings about different things and situations that get brought up in regards with the Fool.
And he is very defensive in the next trilogy about how he will never like the Fool. He would never want to lay with the Fool. And he's like super embarrassed that the Fool could even tell other people that they're together. Or, like, even hint that could possibly be a thing. But, I mean, on the other hand, potentially that's a reaction to society's view on men being together. Not necessarily because he truly feels like he could never be with the Fool that way, but more so because he wants to be a proper man and whatever that means in this sense.
Yeah. It's, again, like we've mentioned before, there's nothing specifically spelled out in these books. We can infer a lot from different things, but Robin Hobb is pretty vague. Same with Burrich.
Yeah.
He could have the same pressures on him as we've discussed with his feelings toward chivalry. I don't know. It's such
a hard thing, but it is cool that people that are bi can find a character that is relatable to them and their situations.
Definitely.
So
they also were kind of bringing up the back, I think is in chapter 13 with Fitz drawing.
Oh, yes.
And how miraculously talented he is. And Fitz seems to have just a bunch of different skills all the time, and skills brought up out of nowhere that are just kind of like laid out in one or two lines in front of the reader, and they don't really touch on the story. Mm-hmm. So it's probable that he's actually really good at art and just practices that. So I thought that was kind of funny too to look at. I still don't think he should be able to draw that well, but
I know.
Fitz, come on.
Maybe he's just super talented. We don't know.
Draws those plants every day, all day.
All day long.
All right. So thank you so much again for listening.
And thanks for being part of the conversation, you guys.
Yeah.
If you would like to join the conversation, be sure to message us and maybe we'll bring up what you said next time.
And make your friends read these books.
Yeah.
So you can talk to them and they can talk to us. And
we can get all kinds of new ideas.
Yeah.